Okay, so hello everyone. We're going to change gears a little bit compared. I was just listening to the fascinating lecture you just had, and I am interested. I am actually a neuroradiologist, so I do imaging related to many of the things that you just heard about. But what we're going to do in the next hour is give you an introduction and hopefully some helpful hints with regard to medical school admissions. Our chat is open. The director of admission, Lisa Ellenbogen, and the assistant director of admission, Christopher Fazio, are going to be manning the chat. So we will try to answer questions as you put them forward, but Josh has been nice enough to let us know we can save the chat, and he'll share our email with you. So hopefully we'll be able to address a lot of your questions and concerns. And I'm going to ask you a couple of questions along the way. So if you're quick on the button, you can answer and see how you do. So the first question is, what was the first medical school in the United States? And did anybody, let's see if anybody's put in an answer. Do we have any answers? Well, I'll give you the answer, and Chris and Lisa.
Pens and a lot of Harvards.
Okay, you got some pens? Okay,
we got some pens in there.
So, of course, the answer is the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, of which I am proudly a graduate, as is Dr. David Langer, who is the head of the program that you're participating in, and he is just a few years behind me. And interesting that I'm a neuroradiologist and he's a neurosurgeon, so there's something about that pen air that definitely attracts us to the neurosciences. The next question is, who was the first woman graduate of an American medical school? Lisa, tell me if we get an answer flying through.
Let's see. Elizabeth Blackwell, Elizabeth Blackwell.
Okay, good. So we got some smart people in there, and it is Elizabeth Blackwell, who graduated from the Geneva Medical College in New York in 1849. So some people are very much on top of their medical school history. So who was the father of modern medical education?
Let's see. Hippocrates? I don't know.
Hippocrates.
Uh-huh.
So, okay, that's not so much modern medical education. But
Osler. William Osler.
Okay.
Tons of Oslers.
Okay. And the answer is, where's the answer? Here he comes. Abraham Flexner, okay, who came out of Johns Hopkins and was the author of the Flexner Report in 1910. 2 years basic science, 2 years clinical training, and many schools, although not ours, we're a little different, and you'll get some more information about us a little bit later on, but that has basically been the model for medical education for a very, very long time. Now, give you an idea, and this is, I think this slide is a very good content slide. It gives you information about the 2019 cycle, which was not the one that we are currently finishing, but the year before. So you can see there are about, whoa, I meant to go back, hold on. Okay, there are about, oh, here we go. My slides are a little funky, but let's go forward. Okay, there are about 50,000 plus applicants to medical school. About 20,000 end up enrolling. So it's about a 40% accept rate, give or take a couple of percentage points. You can see the male-female split. You see the average GPA of the applicants. This is, again, in the 2019 cycle was about a 3.6, whereas the current GPA for the enrollees is about a 3.73. You can see that the MCAT, the mean MCAT for the accepted and enrolled group is about a 512, whereas that from the applicant group is about a 506. And I just put that forward to you so you have some perspective of what's going on in medical school admissions in terms of the numbers. So about 42-3% get into at least one school. So again, it's a competitive process, as I think you can appreciate from this slide, and getting an idea of male, female, et cetera, and you can see self-identified groups in terms of actual racial ethnic composition of medical school, including just under 50% white, about 20% Asian, 10% Black or African American, somewhere in that. I'm sorry, it's a little less than that. The mixed race is 10%. The Black or African American, a little over 7%, and those who identify as Latinx is lower than that. Go forward, sorry. Okay, so to give you an idea of those things that potentially are important when you apply to medical school. So highest importance you see along the top column, and you see academic metrics, specifically your math science GPA, your MCAT score. Again, people always are concerned about a rough freshman year. Remember, those of us in admissions are sensitive to the fact when you go to college, there is a transition point, students going from smaller environments to larger environments, different geographic environments, et cetera, et cetera. So the most important thing is the upward trend. That's what we want to see. So even if your freshman year didn't go necessarily as you anticipated, remember, just if you keep and you go upward from that freshman year, you're in a good situation. You see that some of the private medical schools, do weight the undergrad that you attended. Some schools, are very much academically rigorous with a tight curve in those pre-med courses. They're curved to a B-, C+. You're in a tough competitive environment. We know that on the admissions end, and we do appreciate that you will your GPA may not be necessarily the same GPA as it would be if you were in a little bit of a less competitive environment. Healthcare experiences are important, and we'll talk a little bit about that, especially in light of the COVID situation. And we've had questions in the various webinars and emails about engaging in activities given the limitation on volunteerism in light of COVID and the requirements for citizenship, etc. Now, you go down the road, medium importance, etc., and then looking at the bottom, some of the things that are less important. Okay, so just to give you a complexion of, how to sort of look at your application and what things potentially to focus on. I also wanted to call your attention to this slide, which gives you some information about the number of applicants to medical school. So you can see that in about 10 years ago, there were about 42,000 plus applicants to medical school. Now, fast forward roughly 10 years later, and the applicant pool has increased by about 10,000 over that 10-year period, whereas the number of matriculants, given the new schools, etc., has increased only 3,000 or in that range. So again, competitive process, so you have some perspective on what that's like. The enrollment is the total enrollment over the 4-year period. The other thing I wanted to call your attention to is this slide. This slide gives you sort of a graphic of a GPA range as well as an MCAT range. And what you see, though, very interestingly, is that those students who sit in that top corner, that top right-hand corner, with an MCAT that's greater than 517, which is great. 517 is the 94th percentile, and a GPA of greater than 3.8, there are still roughly 12, it's actually 12% who do not get in. So my question to you is, why do you think that 12% is not getting in? And I'm gonna, Lisa, Chris, I want you to read out some of the answers for me, if you possibly can, or if we have
no clinical experience while they're going so fast, interviews, poor interview, not a well-rounded application,
okay,
lack of outside experience.
Okay, good. So one of the things is, in fact, interview, right? So as opposed to law school, business school, medical school requires an interview. And that is one of the answers. And that is that students who interview poorly, part of medical school is and is communication. Part of being a physician is communication. And I think probably you may have learned that from the groups that you've participated in up until this point. So that interview is important, and the numbers and your experiences may get you in the door. But once you're in that door to interview, you have to be able to communicate. So that's one reason. The other thing is institutional actions. So that's one of the things that you will be asked on your AMCAS application. Have you had any institutional actions? Now, we understand schools have different rules with warnings and drinking violations and things like that. We take that into consideration, and we understand that. Issues of ethical conduct are considerably more important. So those that involve cheating, plagiarism, those kind of arrests, etc. So those potentially may be reasons that these students who may have had very high metrics don't necessarily get in as well. Just to give you an idea of what the mean MCAT scores look like. So these, if you look, this is the slide for the applicants, and you can see that the mean chem physics score is about a 126. The critical read score is a 126. Bio and biochem is about a 127. And the psych soc is about a 127. Now that's for, again, the applicant pool in total. All right, and again, I mentioned the mean MCAT of the applicant pool is about a 506, but when you look at the acceptances and the matriculants, those numbers are considerably higher, with the total MCAT accept being about a 511, 512 range. It's a 511.5, so right in the middle there, but understand again that that is national number. So that's the national number. When you're in different parts of the country, the competitiveness of the process may change depending on where you're located. So next question, what was the first year the MCAT was administered? So do we have some answers for that?
Nothing yet. Let's see. Let me scroll down. 2015 for the current one.
Correct.
Okay, good, for because it's called MCAT 2015, so that's a very smart person who answered that question.
1980, 1920, 1980s, 2015, 1928, 1927.
Okay, so somebody Googled that and got the right answer, and it's 1928. And the new MCAT, as is mentioned, is called MCAT 2015, and the revision was, in fact, in April 2015, with the revision prior to that in 1991. To give you just quick about the MCAT, the old exam used to cover biochem, physics, verbal reasoning. There were 3 scores. The new exam adds biochem, psychology, sociology. And you can see that it's a different type of process in that it very much tests your ability to apply knowledge. There is a recognition that no longer is medicine just about fact recall, as fact retrieval, as that person who was able to get that 1928 number right off the top. It's very quick. You can retrieve facts very, very quickly. You don't necessarily need your temporal lobe to be working on overtime to get to those answers. But what physicians need to do in this day and age is to apply knowledge. And that's really our goal. And that's what the MCAT exam tries to test. So again, this is what the structure of the exam looks like or looked like when it was first released. Now we do have, and I'll give you an idea of those of you who haven't taken the exam yet, of the COVID related changes, but you can see each section is scored between 472 and a 528 with a mean score of a 500 if you get I'm sorry, the total score, I'm sorry about that. The total score is between a 472 and a 528 with the mean score about a 500, and each section is scored from a 118 to a 132 with the goal being the mean in each section to be about a 125, so therefore the total for the exam would be a 500. Now, given the COVID environment and the need for them to give MCATs with a safe social distance, they have shortened the exam and have allowed 3 exam cycles to occur in each day that the test is offered. So by shortening the exam, basically what largely they've done is remove some of the experimental questions, because those are always part of the exam. So you can see that they've shortened each section by about 10 questions each, and have allowed that test to be given in about a 6-hour framework. So they are able to seat they are able to do 3 cycles, a 6 a.m. to 12 noon for you early risers, a 12 noon to 6 p.m. for those of you who function very well in the middle of the day. And for the night owls, the 6 p.m. to 12 midnight exam is also available. And I know, some of you who are maybe still in college function very well in that 6 p.m. to 12 midnight time frame. So that's how the MCAT, at least right now, is being administered in a socially distanced environment, and in one that potentially is safe for all of you. Whenever students are applying to medical school, I always recommend, and especially given the competitiveness of it being a 40% roughly accept rate from the applicant pool, have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D. How are you going to approach it if you don't get in? Some students choose to pursue the osteopathic route. Now, MD and osteopathic schools are slightly different. You can see the MCAT, the average applicant MCAT in an MD program is about a 506, in an osteopathic program a 503. The GPAs, again, slightly lower on the osteopathic side. Interestingly, though, the step 1, which will soon become pass-fail, the current, I think, what will be our current first-year students that are rising to the second year will be the last group to take it as a score test. After that, it will become pass-fail. So that will be interesting as well. But you see that the pass rate is roughly the same. About a third of osteopathic students did not gain acceptance to allopathic schools, and MD or allopathic residencies are open to osteopathic applicants, whereas osteopathic residencies are not open to MD applicants. So that's an interesting factoid as well. Again, subtle differences in the education, but osteopathic students can feed in to MD residencies. And in my own residency program in radiology at Northwell, in the North Shore LIJ residency program, we have had osteopathic students who feed into and participate in our radiology residency. How many allopathic medical schools are there in the United States as of today? Lisa, Chris, any answers here?
147.
Okay.
154. 150-ish.
Okay, good. Okay, so there are 155, I think, am I right about that? Or that have full LCME accreditation, and an additional 13 that have a preliminary provisional accreditation, and we were the 133rd medical school. We actually have gone through already our second full accreditation cycle. So we were preliminary, provisional, full, and we've already gone through and done our second full, and got the full 8-year permit to continue. So we achieved our goal, and that is the longest length of time between our LCME accreditation visit. So good idea to have this in perspective as well. How many osteopathic medical schools are there in the United States? Any questions, answers there?
6, 74, 40, 60, 70.
All over the map. So there are 37 osteopathic medical schools, and only 2 actually offer both an MD and a DO program, and that is Michigan State and the University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey. So here are a couple of useful websites for those of you who may want to screen save. StudentDoctor.net is like a college confidential kind of thing. I do recommend you be a little careful when you go in there, because there is some misinformation that sometimes gets promulgated on that website. And so again, you know, it's obviously students like yourselves who are pre-meds applying to medical school. So some interesting information can get shared in there. So again, just have your radar up and try to verify some of the stuff in there before you choose to go down a path that is questionable. That's all I'll say. Okay, so now let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your application. One of the things that we get a frequent questions about is your personal statement. Now understand, obviously, given that there are 50,000 applicants to medical school a year, the people on our end, on the admissions end, we are reading a lot of essays. The most important thing, given the fact that you have put in the time to write a personal statement, is that it's interesting. Because if you don't engage the reader at the get-go, they're not going to read your essay. Okay, it's going to be a quick skimming out. So most important thing is that hook. Okay, the leading sentence. You have to engage the reader with words and verbal images that you create. Okay, make it interesting. Hook in that reader. You don't want somebody to do a skim job on your essay. There are different types of leading sentences here. Again, standard creative action, a quote, informative. Again, hook that reader, because that will get your essay read. Try to make it as personal as possible. Again, examples rather than just telling. That's what show rather than tell. Don't try to use words that you don't use in your normal verbal or written conversations. Active voice is important. Don't be overly descriptive. I always say, don't get I-itis, okay? Don't put in too many I. Okay, I did this, I did that, I will be a good doctor, I am great, I am wonderful. Don't do that, okay? Limit the amount of times you use that word I. And cliches. Oh, cliches are huge now. People talk about staying in their lanes. We have this conversation amongst my group all the time about pivoting.
I was just going to say pivoting.
Yeah. a lot of words that are tossed around. Avoid cliches, avoid redundancy. That's important. Okay. I can't stress that enough. Try and use a little bit more formal language, although one that's conversational. Your personal statement from the AAMC, consider the questions. Tell your story. What is your narrative? Why did you decide to go into medicine? Why do you want to learn more about medicine? What about you that has not come across in other areas of your application should medical schools know about you? Do you have specific circumstances that have affected your life's course and your learning process and your educational environment? And again, tell your story. I can't stress that enough. Try and make it personal, and you can get to medical school by doing research at the NIH. You can get to medical school because you're from an underserved community and have worked with an underserved population. There are so many different ways of telling a story and of including elements in your story. So again, focus on your personal narrative. Some rules of thumb here. Stick to your theme and specific examples. If you worked in the soup kitchen, or you worked in an underserved area, in an under-resourced school, a student, don't talk about all the students. Give us a story of one student. How did you impact that student? How did you fall short with that student? It doesn't always have to be positive. And what you can learn, obviously, many of us, including myself, we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. There is no reason why you cannot necessarily use an example that ended up being a failure. That will allow you to reassess yourself, reassess, what your goals are and how to achieve those goals. Good writing is simple writing, stay on subject again, and obviously answer the questions, don't go off on crazy tangents. Again, find your voice or your unique angle. Again, don't be too self-congratulatory, too self-deprecating. That's a fine line to balance. But again, you don't want to come off as being arrogant or egotistical. On the other hand, you don't want to come across as somebody who beats yourself up, all the time. Because in medicine, we do make mistakes. We have many, many failures, and we have to be resilient. We have to learn from them. We have to overcome them. So again, a mid-ground is always a good ground. Get feedback. That is exceptionally important. Don't be afraid to show your essay to your pre-med advisor, to somebody who has, fairly good English skills. I find this very often, and in my group with Chris and Lisa, and we work with each other, we'll be preparing a document, and we won't necessarily, you read it over 16 times your PowerPoint presentation, and somebody else will take a look at it and in 1 second finds the typo. You know what I mean? That you just could not see after looking at it for so many times. So again, I hope, is that flashing across the screen? I hope not. Okay, so proofread, incredibly important, not only for errors in grammar and spelling and punctuation, but also for your ideas. Am I putting forward something that's interesting that will get read? So some of the fatal flaws of the application, again, lack of substance, failure to answer question, cliche, superficial, and sort of confused or detour type of thinking, for a nice way to put it. And again, engage your reader, keep your application alive. Examples are key for that. Lessons learned, key for that. Again, direct answers to the questions, and again, write so that the reader can follow your thought process. We're going to transition to the secondary essay. So many schools approach the secondary pretty differently. Ours, we have a couple of questions without a long additional essay, but more of a shorter sort of 1,500 character essay. And then we did, and we have added in a COVID-related essay, and I'll talk about that in a second. But basically, the goal here is to provide to the school more detailed information about why you're interested in medicine, to fill in some missing info in your profile. Don't repeat what's in your Common App, what's in your AMCAS in the secondary. I would be careful there. The goal in the secondary is to provide additional information. As you see here, seamlessly complement your application without overlapping information. So that's very, very important. Again, here, answer the questions, focus on new material, and every word counts. So remember that in the secondary, they are shorter than that AMCAS essay. And again, don't try to fit more words in by using smaller font. Answer the question, directed answers. That's the goal here. Use the same rules of thumb for the secondary essay as you do for the AMCAS application. And again, let the reader know what is important to you and why. And I think that's very, very important. I always tell students, and when they're applying to medical school, don't play defense in your application. Play offense. So, you got to be in orgo. You got to see an orgo, and you twisted your ankle, your dog died, whatever it is. And there are a myriad of possibilities as to why you may not have performed at that same academic standard. But I feel that in circumstances where there may be a circumstance behind you not necessarily achieving at the same academic level, you finish the course, and that to me is important, rather than withdrawing, rather than, look, I had main issues, and obviously in the COVID environment, there are a lot of things going on, and we're aware of that. The fact that you continued, that you finished is important. So spin positive. Don't play defense and say, oh, I got that B- because I was this, that, and the other. But it was like, I finished the course, I was able to get through it, I started off, I bombed that first test, but somehow I got my act together and I was able to use this and that resource, and I finished. And though maybe I didn't perform at the level of the rest of my transcript, I was able to complete. So always remember, don't play defense, play offense, and spin positive, even when you see something that you think may not be quite to the level that you think the medical school wants to see. So, common secondary essay questions. For those of you who are finishing your applications now, and who are in our current cycle, and who are now starting to receive secondaries, 99% you're going to get a COVID or potentially a COVID-related question. So make sure that you have an answer to a COVID-related question. So here we go, and given the pandemic, we are aware that there may be certain challenges you have encountered during the application process. Please use this space to describe those challenges. So have that question answered, because many, many schools are going to ask you that. And then there are some others that we're just pointing out here. Why do you want to go to that school? And be careful, okay? Because we have had it in our school, and Lisa and Chris can verify this information. Students may use a similar type answer for different, look, we expect you to do that, right? To use an answer for one school versus another, but yet you want to make the answer specific to the school. Don't just cut and paste and leave the name of that other school in your answer. We have seen in our secondaries, in our letters of intent, I really want to attend Georgetown University School of Medicine, and it's sent to us. So again, that goes to proofreading, that goes to being careful. So just be careful there, okay? Here you go with some helpful hints here. So hopefully, as I've been waxing poetic, you've had a chance to take a look and consider some of the things that you may answer with regard to a specific school. Where do you hope to be in 10 years? Again, what your goals are within medicine. There are people who enter medicine for a variety of different reasons, many different interests. So education, business of medicine, technology, underserved areas, except working with the underserved, global health. So again, you have an opportunity to expand on some of your goals of pursuing medicine as a career. Some of the tips, again, people want to know that you know what medicine is all about. You know what you're getting yourself into, at least to a certain extent. Those of you who have grown up with parents as physicians, obviously you've lived it, you have some idea, but for those of you who don't necessarily, and the vast majority don't, you have to explain or demonstrate that you do have some knowledge of what being a physician is all about. Clinical experiences, and again, understand that we will understand that because of the COVID environment, there may not be the richness of clinical experiences available to students. The other thing I would say is, and this is specific to our school, we are not a school that very much promotes shadowing. Our dean, Dr. Smith, says 1 day of shadowing is enough. We're about active learning, and I'm going to give you a little bit of information about our school as we move forward. So, you can shadow for 1 day, and as far as we're concerned, that'll be enough. You don't learn medicine, you don't learn what medicine is all about by watching somebody do medicine. Scribe, again, in the COVID environment may be a little bit more difficult in terms of scribe jobs in certain parts of the country, but do something that's active if you're going, in the process of getting clinical exposure. If you're doing research in the clinical environment, can you engage and use some of that research in the clinical environment? So again, an active engagement in clinical experience, we feel, especially for our school, is more important than active shadowing. It's again, this and thank you notes and letters of intent and all of that, and this sort of brings to light something, and you can see here, we do suggest, you can write thank you notes, make them specific, thank the interviewer for their time, something about the discussion, making it a little bit personal. But the other thing is, my single bit of advice that I recommend and put forward to all of you as you enter this process is, you have to be professional with every person that you interact with. If you call an admissions office, you must be polite to that person on the phone. Whoever that person is, you have to be polite to every single person. If you're interacting with the medical students on an interview day, if you're interacting on a webinar, remember that medicine admissions is all about a team input, and those little things, those nuances can affect your application, okay? If you're rude, if you're inappropriate, it can have a negative impact. You think, oh, it's just a student worker in the admissions office. Why do I care? I'm upset. They didn't send me my secondary. I didn't get my interview. Whatever it is, you have to be professional in all of your interactions throughout the process. Okay, and here again, the letter of intent, and we will give you a little bit more information about that when you interview with us. If you end up applying to us and you are granted an interview, at what point during the admissions process those letters of intent really have teeth, as opposed to just putting it out to every school when you initially apply and interview. It's important that you use this in a targeted way. And again, if you make it through the process and to the level of interview, you'll get a little bit more detail about that, and certainly for us. So remember, and again, here in your application, 4 focus points. In the application: academic achievement, research, medically related experience, community service, and passion, okay? And I'm emphasizing the passion. If you're passionate about music, how are you tying music into one of these categories? If you're passionate about art, how do you tie that in? If you're passionate about working in underserved communities, how are you doing that? How are you tying these in? Because the key to a successful application is being able to take these 4 focus points and somehow tie them to you and tie them into your narrative. So I leave you with that. Now, here are a bunch of resources if you want to take a screenshot of that, and you can again get a lot of information here about how to approach your application to medical school. Okay, in our last few minutes here, or about on the tail back end here, we're going to go through a little bit about our school, about the Zucker School of Medicine at Hofstra Northwell, and how we differ from many of our medical schools, given that we are a relatively newer school, and that we currently have just recruited our 10th year, and we're very excited about that. So one of the big things in our school is our ability to interweave clinical medicine with science. And our goal is to teach science in such a way that it sticks, and that you're able to put it in a clinical context. So how do we do that? On the y-axis, you see those are the 3 main curricular components that are part of each course. What we call mechanisms of health, disease, and intervention. Those are our PEARLS cases, our small group learning, where you'll learn physiology, pathophysiology, pharmacology, and therapeutics. Structure, which is our current approach to anatomy, which is not only teaching you anatomy and gross anatomy through dissection, but actually taking the macro anatomy and coupling it with pathology, histopathology, and embryology, as well as imaging. And ultrasound has taken on a new life in medicine and a new life in medical education. And we're actually at the forefront of teaching ultrasound in medical education. And then the last piece of each course is what we talk about of patient, physician, and society, which is some of the non-biologic sciences, as well as clinical work. So one of the things that's got us a lot of buzz at the Zucker School of Medicine is that we start medical school, and we will do it this year as well, with EMT training. All of our students in the first year class will become licensed EMTs, assuming they pass the EMT exam, at the end of the first course of medical school. In addition to the EMT training, they also engage in our curriculum, which includes the PEARLS cases as well as the structure. So your cases in the first course, the acute stroke patient, the acute myocardial infarction, smoke inhalation, foreign body aspiration, spinal cord injury. So those are the kind of cases that you'll learn about in the case-based learning. The structure, you're going to do pulse point evaluation. You're going to do head and neck anatomy for purposes of intubation. So those are the types of activities that you're going to engage in on top of the EMT training. After we finished EMT, we take an evolutionary approach to the human body. We start with basically cell biology and genetics. Structure is male and female pelvis and human reproduction. And the clinical work that you're going to engage in is going to be with the OBGYNs. You will start delivering babies about 9 to 10 weeks into medical school, working in the OBGYN offices, okay? And what you're going to do is throughout these first 100 weeks, you're going to have 5 different mentors that you will work one-on-one with. It's not going to be, again, 5 of you going to a doctor's office once a month or whatever and following somebody around. Every week, you will go to a physician's office and you will work one-on-one with that physician and get involved in their practice. It's an OBGYN, a surgeon, medicine or family medicine, peds, and then there is an, at Zucker's Hillside, which is one of our psychiatric hospitals, a psych experience that goes along with the human condition, which is the last course, the neurosciences. So we sort of have these 3 components. It follows the first 100 weeks. We do have a summer experience in between year 1 and year 2. That has a very robust research program. In that 10-week period of time, and I always say this slide is not drawn to scale, that little yellow stripe between the first year and the first 50 weeks, second 50 weeks, is actually the same size of the box of green of the biologic imperative. So we do give you time to engage in research, and over 90% of our students take advantage of our research program and engage in research between year 1 and year 2. A typical week, each week has a theme. You'll come in on Monday. The theme of the week may be anemia. On Monday morning, you'll take an hour and you'll start developing learning directions for the first case, which is a sickle cell anemia, which is the hereditary anemia. And then the second hour, you'll start developing in your small group of 9 students, the second learning direction group for a hereditary anemia, for an acquired anemia like an iron deficiency anemia. And then framing sessions follow to help you with foundational concepts. You will need to solve case 1 on Wednesday, and then you see it repeated again on Wednesday for case 2, where you'll solve that case on Friday. You can see we have that clinical work. I mentioned those 5 different mentors. It is every afternoon a week, 1 afternoon a week. For the purpose of this graphic, it's on Monday, but it can be any afternoon during the week. The other thing to take note of is that big block of time on Thursday, structure, which is where you will do your anatomy. But again, we talk about the anatomy coupled together with histopathology, with imaging, with physical diagnosis. So structure, again, is put in a context where it's usable and workable in clinical medicine. Friday, a piece where you'll do the non-biologic sciences, whether it's statistics or ethics or business of medicine. That comes to life in the PPS piece on Friday. And then you can see Tuesday, we have what we call review and reinforcement. That's troubleshooting. So understand when you're in your groups of 9, your small group learning, you have a facilitator in there. They make sure that you're not going off track when you're going over your case-based learning, but they're not specifically content experts. The content experts run the larger group sessions, and they run the review and reinforcement, which is basically student-driven and is an attempt to give you an opportunity to ask questions. Chances are, if you're having a difficulty with a concept, other students in the class are having the same issues, and that's an opportunity to ask questions. It can be 2 hours, it can be an entire day long. It's very much driven by our students. You see all this green time. That is your time. That is not class time. We spend between 20 to 30 hours in class a week. The rest of the time is for you to prepare your case-based learning, to prepare for the structure labs. We're all about an adult learning environment. We teach you how to learn as an adult because medicine is a continuous learning process. My field, neuroimaging, has evolved so much from when I finished my residency training to where we are today. So again, you have to have those skills, and we teach you those skills, how to learn on your own and be a lifelong learner. And that largely is operative from when you walk into medical school in our school. Our second 100 weeks, 6 required rotations. They go in these pairs. Neuropsych go together, OB-Peds go together, medicine surgery go together. The pairs go together, though the order you take it within the pair is variable. So one student may start with psych and one student may start with neuro. The same thing in terms of the order you do them in. So one student may start med-surg, the other student may start neuropsych. So that depends, and that's by lottery. Locations, North Shore, LIJ, and Lenox Hill for surgery, medicine, OB, and neurology. All the peds is done at Cone Children's Hospital. We have a dedicated children's hospital. Pediatric experience is unparalleled. It is incredible. We have put out a lot of pediatricians because of that incredible environment at Cone Children's. And for those of you who have had the privilege of working in a pediatric hospital, I think you can appreciate, or unfortunately may have been in a pediatric hospital, I think you can appreciate the differences when you're in a pediatric hospital versus being a child in a hospital that is a general adult hospital with pediatric service. The other rotation is psych, and that you do at one of 2 freestanding psychiatric facilities. And again, an unparalleled experience of doing psych in a psychiatric hospital, either Zucker Hillside or South Oaks. Because you've done a lot of good clinical work in your first 2 years working with those 5 mentors, we also give you opportunities to do selectives. They're just electives in the health system, but they allow you in your 3rd year, whereas most schools it's pushed over to the 4th year, but they allow you time to start looking at what specialty you may want to pursue that may not be embedded in these 6 core rotations. You want to do ophthalmology or urology, those are early matches. So you want to make sure that if you are interested in those, you are in fact interested in them. You've had an opportunity to work on that service, work with the residents, work with the attendings, and get an idea if that's really what you want to do. Because if you do want to do those specific specialties, you're going to have to build a portfolio and a resume or CV that's going to support your application to that particular specialty. You're interested in ENT, you're interested in orthopedics, you're interested in pathology, again, interventional radiology. You have an opportunity to pursue these selectives in your 3rd year, which is very, very helpful. There are actually 3 of them. The 3rd one is embedded in medicine and has to be a medicine subspecialty. either endocrine, renal, cardiology, pulmonology, etc. Fourth year, 5 electives. You can bunch them together and do them all together. Obviously, this year, for our fourth year students, they are not going to be able to travel to other institutions, whereas that's largely what students have used elective time for in the past, to sort of do audition electives at various locations. There are ways of doing research during that time. We actually have students that work with us in admissions and do an admissions elective. So there are research electives, there are teaching electives. So students can use that time effectively and again pursue some avenues that they choose to before completing medical school. 3 requirements, and those are such we are confident that you can function as an intern when you leave. One is doing a rotation in an ICU setting, and it depends on what you're going into. If you're going into OB, you may go to the neonatal ICU. If you're going into surgery, you're going to go to our SICU or our surgical ICU. If you're going into anesthesia, we have an anesthesia care, a post-anesthesia care unit. So a lot of that ICU time will be spent going into the area of your interest. An emergency room rotation, either in adult or peds, and again, depending what you're going into, and then an acting internship in family medicine or medicine, peds, or surgery, again, will be focused on the area that you're choosing to pursue. Professional development time is time to interview for residency, time to move, and again, these can be assorted in different orders, and they can be clumped together or spread apart, but just to give you an idea of what it looks like. Regarding COVID, and sort of to give you a little bit of information about that, 50% of our fourth years who are now first year house officers are ones graduated early and went into Northwell and actually helped. Many of you may be aware Northwell saw the largest volume of COVID cases probably in the world when COVID first had its initial wave and really blanketed the New York area. And we were one of the first publications in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, with a review of roughly over 5,000 patients that initially presented with COVID. So we had a lot of experience, but a lot of need. And roughly half of our graduating class graduated in April and went to work within the Northwell environment on the front lines. There are others who participated in various different activities, and I list this for you because you can see that there are activities that you as students or potential medical school applicants can engage in. They include the PPE drives, the support of the elderly in your community. I listen to the radio sometimes and I hear, advertisements for spending 10 minutes and talking to an elderly person who is isolated at home given the fear of COVID. You can engage, and there are organizations that will allow you to do that, support the elderly, shop for the elderly. And on the other hand, students working with elementary, the Project Teach, working with those students who are learning in the virtual environment, in elementary school, in high school, who don't necessarily have the resources to what they would if they were in school, and support and all of that. So I would very much advocate take advantage and pursue some of these kinds of things, because we on the admissions end are aware that there are going to be limits in terms of the research and the clinical work you can do, but there are many, many opportunities to do community service and those types of activities in your process. Okay, last little bit, we're going to talk about the post-bac program. So there were some questions that filtered through to us through some of the other presenters that are part of the administration and faculty at Hofstra. So for those of you who are looking at post-bac programs, there are 2 main types. One are the career changer programs, and those are for those of you who did not necessarily take pre-med courses while you are in college, who ventured out, who decided to pursue another career, but have decided and saw the light and want to pursue medicine. And a few of the programs we list here, the Bryn Mawr, the Columbia, the Goucher. Then there are post-bac programs that are what we call career boosters or academic enhancers. There are medical master's programs, and a couple of them are listed here. New York Med has a program, Temple has a program. There are programs that are specifically geared toward the underrepresented in medicine groups. The Princeton, and you can see here this website, so for those of you who are specifically interested in post-bac, if you take a look, and Princeton has a very good site that outlines a bunch of the different programs available, but when you are looking at these programs, look at what box you fall in, because that will direct you to the proper program to prepare you for your medical school application. With regard to us at the Zucker School of Medicine, we have post-bac linkage programs. Those are schools where if you go to this school's post-bac program, instead of having to wait a year between the completion of the program and starting medical school, you can actually apply while you're in the post-bac program, and we'll give you a little bit of detail about that. These programs have linkages to various schools, so you can check their sites and actually see what schools they're linked to. And some of the schools waive the MCAT, depending on your performance at the undergrad level, as well as your performance in the post-bac program and your past standardized test scores. So again, a lot of different ways to approach the post-bac, but this is specifically geared toward people who are career changers, so those who have not yet undertaken the pre-med coursework prior to entering the post-bac program. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of where we sit in the medical school hierarchy, so this of New York, this was based on last year's cycle data, not the current cycle that we currently completed. I mentioned our current average or median MCAT is actually a 517 with a GPA of roughly the same. It's about a 3.8 at this point, or 3.79. So this is sort of where we sit. This is, again, the data not from the 2020 cycle, which just finished, but actually from the 2019 cycle. So again, for those of you who are New York oriented, you see sort of where and what the median MCAT looks like, and the median GPAs that the schools are looking at just in terms of the metric. And then some people you may be familiar with. I mentioned David Langer, a graduate of Penn Medicine, as was I, and a long-term colleague of mine prior to him moving over and working at Lenox Hill. I worked out of Shore LIJ predominantly. But I hope all of you have had the opportunity to watch Lenox Hill. As I mentioned, Lenox Hill is one of the tertiary hospitals where you can do your rotations in the 3rd and 4th years, the main core medicine, surgery, OB, and neurology. So for those of you who have fallen in love with Lenox Hill, based on the Netflix series, you will be able to go back there and work there in your clinical years and doing research. Some of our students have, I know, taken advantage and done some very robust research projects with the faculty and staff at Lenox Hill. Some have done their EMT runs through Lenox Hill in the first course as well. So I thank you all for your attention. Lisa, Chris, is there anything very pressing that we should answer before? Have we been able to troubleshoot and get through the questions, or some of them, or a lot of them?
A lot of them were definitely, there was one about gap years.
Okay.
And non-traditional students, and what would you suggest during gap years? That was mentioned quite a few times.
Okay, so again, with regard to gap year, and again, it will change probably a little bit right now given the COVID environment. You know, there are so many different things that you can do. One I would recommend is follow your passion. If you're interested in teaching, obviously, and excuse my ignorance because I don't know where TFA is right now, Teach for America, in the COVID environment. Maybe Chris or Lisa, you can Google that as I'm talking and see, you know, what the TFA, Teach for America, AmeriCorps, you know, those kind of, but again, the Project Teach. So if that's your passion, and that's your narrative, obviously those are available to you, and teaching is always viewed very positively. Obviously the research environments, but that will depend. I know there are certain research projects. Actually, our own students are engaging in research online over the summer, so there are still research projects out there that you can do remotely. So research is definitely something that's supported. Travel is going to be limited, and we know that. So the Peace Corps, the Fulbrights, those kind of things, we are, you know, aware may be limiting. If you have an opportunity and want to support your application in further preparing for medical school, you know, you didn't necessarily take a biochem course, an anatomy course, but you were still able to do well on your MCAT, you may want to round that out a bit, or take courses in things that you feel may potentially complement your medical school education. And so I would take advantage of that time. Make sure that you are putting forward something on your application, because that's a frequently asked secondary question. You know, your gap year, your motivation for taking the gap year. Are you helping support your family? Did your parent or caretaker or guardian lose their job? And are you helping support your family, you know, during the COVID? And those are, you know, these are all answers and, you know, things that will support, you know, though I know that you're doing them because of necessity, but they will support your application. You know, what are you, make sure that you have a good answer for what you're doing during that time. And financially supporting your education and supporting your family is definitely a good answer. And one that, you know, we not only accept, but celebrate. So, you know, you know, fiducial responsibilities are definitely ones that we take seriously. Anybody else, anything else that we need to answer up front, or we can sort of go back to our computers and answer going forward?
I think we're good there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so medicine.admissions at hofstra.edu, right?
Yep.
That's
I'm putting
how,
it into the chat right now.
okay, it'll be in the chat. You know, please feel free to email us. We're available to you. We had a general webinar a few weeks back. We tried to make the presentation today a little bit different to give you a little bit more of a broader view of the admissions process. Obviously, we had to put in our own shameless plug for our own institution, but we hope that we provided you with some helpful information going forward. And please don't be strangers. We do have webinars. We're on that AAMC, you know, the virtual the virtual information fair, the virtual fairs. We participate in those. So we hope to help you in any way we can support your application to medical.
And just for those asking, we do have a BSMD program, so you can check out our website for that information as well.
We do have a 4-4 program. We actually also have a ZPP program, which is for underrepresented in medicine, and that is a program that you apply into during college. The best time to do it is your freshman year, because you take and you enter the program between freshman and sophomore, though it is possible to enter at the end of sophomore year, and that helps you with MCAT prep and academic preparation and researching and mentoring. So those opportunities are specifically available for our students who are underrepresented in medicine.
And it's the Zucker Pipeline Program.
That's the ZIP program,
the ZIP.
ZPP.
Yep.
Okay, and that's on our website as well. Yep. All right, we're done. I made it. Okay, I wasn't sure I was going to make it in the time frame, a little bit over, so I apologize for that. Thanks to all of you for your attention. And as I said, we hope to see all of you future doctors in our field. It is a very rewarding journey, but one that requires an ability to be resilient, an ability to basically be empathic and to be passionate about your science and your patients.
Thank you so much, Dr. Woldenberg. For anyone wondering, I will post in the Facebook group the email that she gave out today, and I will make sure to have this video up, the recorded lecture up in the next day or two. So thank you guys so much for joining today, and we'll see you all again tomorrow.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.